Learning to use Davinchi Resolve can be very challenging, especially when you're new to the software. You just install the software or got the software, which is free, but you open it up and then you meet all these panels and you have no idea and no clue what you need to do. That's why I'm here. My name is Tekkmood and I'm going to take you from importing your first clips, bringing them into Davinchi Resolve, editing, cutting, applying a few fusion effects, color grading and color correction, and working with our audio. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll have what it takes to work with a linear editing software like Davinchi Resolve. So let's go ahead, get your coffee, get ready, and let's jump into Davinchi Resolve. The first thing we want to do is to open up Davinchi Resolve, so I'll just click on that. Another cool thing I'd like to mention is each time Davinchi Resolve is opening, there are these Davinchi Resolve projects from their websites, and you actually get to see a screenshot with the editor, kind of loading, which is kind of nice because it allows you to see different versions of, the program when it's, different projects when it's running. So the first thing you're going to see is an untitled empty project. And once you have that untitled empty project, what we're going to do to run this is to click on that. So I'm not going to discuss about what these are and what's a database and all that. We just want to quickly create a blank project. So double click on the untitled project and let's call this test 1. It's going to be our experimental test, and let's just hit create. So the editor is going to close and load up with that database, and it's putting me in the cut panel. I'll just go ahead and click on this first one at the bottom, and this is what we get, the media panel. So if we look at the bottom here, what's actually happening over here? So the traditional workflow in Davinchi Resolve is there's a 7-panel workflow. So the first panel is for importing your media. The next panel is for working with cutting, arranging, organizing, and sorting your already imported media using a visual interface. We can see this, and the cut page works best with a hardware. So one of those hardware panels where you can easily cut, edit, rewind, and slash videos. This is going to make you work faster with this interface. Next, we have the classic and edit panel. 99% of people are familiar with. Again, if this window is not similar to yours, I'll just go to reset UI layout, so we have that same layout. The edit panel has 2 windows, the source previewer panel and then the source panel where we see and view the actual video. And next we have the fusion page. The fusion page is used to work with visual effects. Then we have the color page, which is used for color balancing, color grading, and color correction, and also shot stabilization, and also short matching to match your colors together. Then we have a specific page for working with sound design, sound effects and all that. And then finally we have a deliver page that delivers your project. Now that we have a basic overview of what the page does, we haven't clicked on any buttons yet, we haven't seen what each page is actually doing. Let's hop over to the media panel and start working from there. So the media panel allows you to organize your footage, to bring in your A rolls, your B rolls, your graphics, and your assets, and keep everything organized. We can create bins, which are called folders. So a bin is just a traditionally in media and filmmaking, they used to have these bins where you can put in the material for the movie material, like the tape. So we put them in bins, so they are called bins, and then that moved from the traditional to the modern terminology. So in this master section at the top here, we can see something called our media storage. If you have any drives attached or your local drive, you're actually going to see it here. So here I have a drive for my users drive for my videos. I have a drive, my drive C, which is where the OS is installed, and we have our volume D, which is another drive on my system. Now if I connect any external drive, it's going to pop up here, and this is where you actually organize your footage. Here in the master section, this is our project, and any clip we import here will be available. So let's go ahead and see how we can import a clip. There are 2 ways of doing this. The quick and dirty way is to just drag Davinchi Resolve, and it's actually one of the ways I like bringing footage. If I go to my videos folder, I could just select any video. I'll just go over here and let's just drag in any. I'll just minimize this and I'll just look for any video footage, and I'll just drag this into here and just copy it like that. And if we go back and maximize Davinchi Resolve, we actually have a footage here. And the cool thing with the media panel is you can easily just glance and see what your footage is. So if I'm just dragging my hand around this, it's just showing me this clip that I used to create this right here. So this is what it's actually showing me. Now what we can do is to make things much more organized. So for example, in master right here, I can right click, create a new bin, and I'll call that bin the A roll. So remember, this is just a folder that has our A rolls, and I'll just drag this clip here and put that in this folder. Now we have a folder called A roll that has one clip. So hope that makes sense. So what we can also do is to import more of these. Now for example, if I wanted to just go over to that same folder here, I'll just drag this down to where I have my videos like so. Or I'll just go over here to my drive C and then slide down like that to video, click on that, and we can just have access to any location where we have our sources and our video clips and all that, like so. So here I'll just go to my folder like that, and we can just use that to import any video clip into our timeline again. So I'll just quickly go through this to see where that is. I believe I have a folder called my Beast Cam because it's an app I use. So Beast Cam, go over here, and I'll just call this. So I'm just looking for my clips. Try this one here. Try this one. I think I have some videos here. Okay, yeah, I'll just drag this one here where I'm looking super gentle. So now in my A roll, I have two video clips. So let's say, for example, I have a B roll apart from the A roll. So I'll go to the master, right click, and then I'll create a new bin, and I'll call that B roll and import my B roll footage. So if I click on B roll here, I can just drag this and place this into this folder. So now I have A roll with two clips, B roll with two clips, like that. And also what we can do is if I click on this video here, I can specify an in and out point. So let's say, for example, here I'm just viewing this, right? I can just drag this into my B-roll, click on the B-roll, and here I can set an in and out point, IO, and say I want to use this in and out point. So if you have things like your graphics, I'll just right click, create a new bin, I'll call that graphics, like so. And basically what I want you to take away from this is that this is where we actually do things like our organization. So let's say, for example, I have these shots, so I select these three like that and drag these two in, and I'll just drag over here, and I can even make this, you know, large like that, a list or large selection, and I'll just drag this here to make this quite large, so I can just see, hey, I want this shot too, so I'll just drag that in. So basically in the media panel here, you can easily see your videos, you can create, you know, bring in your assets in preparation for the project. So that's what we can do here. It does a lot as well. We can sort audio, you know, we can create a folder for audio, just right click, go to new bin, and I'll just call this my audio, like that. So you have, if I have things like any sound effects, I can just bring them in to this section. Now let's move on to the next panel, which is the cut panel. Now the cut panel, whatever we do in the media panel is going to be propagated down here, so we can still see our clips here, but we don't have anything to work on. So to create a timeline which is going to contain our project, so let's go ahead and we can select a clip. So let's go to our A roll, and I'll select this, right click, and say create new timeline using selection, and hit create. And we can actually see we have an object called a timeline which we can use to organize our clips. So for example, if I just have this clip, if I go to the A roll again, I can drag the second clip and place it just above here like that. So when I'm over here, we can see you have another clip like that. So we have this clip here. We can even drag this clip and place it separately, and I'll delete this little space here, and I'll just drag this clip and place that so it's going to be above this when it reaches this point right here. So the cut panel is designed as like a modern app, and it works best using the hardware tool you can use to edit videos very fast. So if you have the Davinchi Resolve, work panel, that board, you can actually use that well with the cut panel. And because I don't have that, and I prefer using the edit page, I don't work that much with the cut panel. But just know that we can slice our clips over here, and these blue colors, we can just do things like change the clip color, change this to apricot. Here that we have this color on top, I can change this clip to yellow, and we can do things like add marker points wherever this timeline head is. Just go over here and add another marker point like that. So we have this marker point, another marker point like that. So basically that's what the cut panel is for. Again, we can go over here, hit this scissors tool and snip this section here as well, and we can do things like drag the duration. So if I drag this, I can pull the clip closer or further away like that. I can do here, drag this closer, or I can just use the single section here and drag this towards the left. So again, it works better with the hardware. Now let's move on to the next section here. And even in the cut panel, we can do things like work with our mixer for the audio, click on the inspector and add effects to videos. I'll just click on those and then go to the edit panel, which is our third panel. Now because we have created our timeline, each stuff we've done, all our cuts have been propagated over here. And what I want to do quickly is to go over here to the top where it says shrink, and I'll just drag this so I can have a wide view of the timeline. The timeline is where you can organize things, work with different layers, work with different footage like so. And we can also see our B-rolls here again, right? So if I wanted to overlay a nice little graphic here, all I need to do is to click on it and then drag that and place that at the position I want. So in case I'm playing this video and I want this graphic to show here, it's going to show at this point. Also, what I want to show you is if I go to the A roll over here, I can select an in and out point. So if I go over here, if I double click on this, this is going to load that into my preview window, which is this window on the left right here, and this is going to be the source window. So this is going to be the final output render right here. That's going to be the output render over here, and this is going to be the source input where we have this tool. So let's keep working on that. So let's say, for example, I just want to get this section here. I'll hit this I for the in point, drag over here, hit O for the out point, and if I drag this clip to the timeline, it's only going to import that short in and out point. And if I don't want that, I can just click this section here and drag this to basically specify which section I'm working with. Now because I'm using this link tool, if I click this link tool, I can select the video and the audio separately. So I'm clicking on the audio separately, and if I use Control X, I'm going to delete that audio such that if I'm playing this, it's only the audio at the bottom that's playing. I can also mute the audio such that if I drag my playhead, it's not going to play anything. Now 90% of the time or 95% of the time you're going to be in the edit page because it's much more similar to other traditional video workflows. So what we can also do on the edit page is to add things like transitions. So if we go to effects at the top left, we can see we have some video transitions. We can just drag a transition and place the transition on a clip like that. So we can add this additive dissolve and click that over there. If I maximize this by using this arrow, we can actually see we have that transition here. So if I play the clip, we can just see that additive dissolve just dissolve like that, just smoothly. And which brings us to our inspector. So if I click on this and go to the inspector, we can actually see that additive dissolve, and we can do things like change the duration, change the start and end sections, add some ease in and out on that just to make the animation a bit smoother to ease in and out. And basically we can do a lot of things like set the duration to like 4 seconds if you want, and drag that back and play that again. We can just see that dissolve just do its thing over there. And that's a bit too high for this. Like so. And we can do things like even change the effect. We can, you know, switch it to another type like arrow iris, and when we do that, we can just see that arrow iris basically just show there and switch. So a lot of things we can do. We can also work with the audio and, you know, fix our audio. For example, if I wanted to bump up this audio, just go over here, unmute that, and just bump this up a bit. We can increase that, or we can just go over here to the volume slider. We can do things like add effects as well and work on our audio. If I go back to the video itself, we can add a little zoom. We can change the X and Y positions for the video. We can do some cropping, add dynamic zoom, such that when the video is playing, we can just see it like, you know, zooming on its own dynamically like that, which makes it, you know, awesome. So basically that's the edit page. We can still do a lot here. We can use some generators, and let's just keep moving on. Right, so like I said, this is where we can work 99% of the time. You can even stay here and do everything in Davinchi Resolve. That's totally fine, but there's still more to go. Now, each time I put a clip, for example, I put my clip over here. If I go to the next page, the Fusion page, which is the page that is known to be, you know, difficult, I'll just click No Yet. This is the page that proves to be, you know, kind of difficult learning because it used nodes. And now let's see what's going on here. So first, we can see 2 windows, right? So what's happening here? So this is going to be our source window, or our media in window, and this is going to be our media out window. Right now, if we look at the bottom left in this media out node, we can actually see this white button selected. If I click on that and it goes away, I won't see anything. If I press 2, I'm going to see it. Now, the media in is our source node, which we have selected here from the edit panel. If I move this over here and we go to the Fusion page, we're going to see this plain, you know, view, this shot that I took of the sky. So let's go back to the edit page, select this, make sure the playhead is over here, and if we go over to the Fusion tab, we can actually see that. So what is the Fusion tab? This is your visual effects section where you can do things like change the color of a person, change the color of the sky, swap the sky, add your effects, play with your green screen, make a person turn into a whale. This is basically your magic section, your VFX section, and it's the most powerful section in Davinchi Resolve, which makes it a bit challenging to work with the node system. So what exactly is a node? A node is basically designed to perform one task. It is a series of compressed tasks and steps of actions that have been resolved to one action. So for example, this media in node is designed to import your footage from your timeline to the Fusion page. That's the purpose of the media in node. And the media out node is to give you an output of your final effect in the effect page. That's what that media out node does. Basically, we can see what these 2 nodes are doing. Each node has a specific task. Now, if I wanted to see the media in, if I press the 1 key or click on this white arrow, this is going to show me the media that's coming in, which we have on the timeline. And right now, we don't have any effects happening here. So let's do something very basic and simple. I'll click on this brightness and contrast node, and I'll place it here. Once I've done that, what I'm going to see is an input here. So once we do that, once we actually do that, we can see we have a brightness and contrast node. This yellow triangle here represents an input, the blue triangle represents a mask, and this represents an output. So we can see the media out has an output. This media in out is going into the media in triangle. The yellow node is our background input. Basically, something is going in here. So if we wanted to change our brightness and contrast in the Fusion panel, we'll take our output into the media input, and then we'll take our output into the media out, so we can actually see that. And make sure I click on the triangle, or else it's not going to connect. So now when we do that and we go on the inspector, if you're on the inspector, we can do things like play with our lift, drag that down a bit. Our gain, push that up a bit. I'll drag that down a bit. Our contrast, we can set our contrast. And then for our brightness, we just make this slightly dark a bit. And then for the saturation, we'll just desaturate this. Now, we're just working with nodes, right? And each node has a single purpose. This node works with the brightness and contrast. And that's what we're doing. We have controls where we're working with the brightness and contrast right here, right? So that's what this node does. Let's add another node. Let's say, for instance, we've worked with our brightness and contrast and we want to work with the color. So let's go ahead and click this color corrector node right here. So again, what we're going to do is to take the output of our brightness into the input of our color corrector and take the output of our color corrector into the input of our media out. So basically what's happening now is if we click on the color corrector and let's say I just want to work with just the correction and I just want to make my image a bit greenish like that, you can see what that's doing, right? So after and it works from left to right. So we have our footage in, we've added a little brightness and contrast, we've added a little color correction, and we've actually have our media out. Now let's see the importance of the blue node. So right here, the blue node is requesting for a mask input, and a mask is nothing more than a smart selection. It's a selection that is stored in memory that has opacity built into it, such that you can use it to protect an area from an effect or reveal an area with an effect. Let's go ahead and see the masks we have here. So first, I'll use this elliptical mask and just click on that. And what I want to do is to plug in this into the input of our color corrector like so. So now you can see what's going on here. I have this ellipse, and everywhere this ellipse is where I'm going to see that effect, right? So it's like we have this sunscreen over here with this mask. And what we can do is to just, do things like edit this mask's border. We can invert the mask, and basically with this invert, what it does is to switch the mask's effect area. And now remember, we have a source viewer. If I click on the 1 key or click on this, we're actually seeing the mask here. So the black area is going to reveal and the white area is going to hide. If I invert the mask, so the white area is going to reveal the content we have here, and the dark areas will just hide on that. So it's using black and white to save the values of that selection. Now if we wanted to do something really good, what we can do is, instead of using this ellipse, which I'll just select this and then hit delete, and I'll just hit my delete key, or we can just right click to remove that. I'll just go ahead and click on the ellipse and just get rid of that connection. Now what I want to do is to use this Bezier handle to create this shape. So I'll just click on here, here, and then I'll use the middle mouse button to just go around the head like so. Nothing too serious. Let's click over here, click down here, and I'll close this. So now we have this polygon shape. What we can do is to begin to adjust it till it just matches that. We have some handles. We just drag that and just make sure we are working on the face area like so. Now let's drag this over here like that. Nothing too serious. We don't want this to be perfect. And now I'll take the output of my mask and plug that into the input of the color corrector. And look what we did here. Now if we go back to that mask, we can still invert that mask again. Now if I'm working on the color corrector, watch what happens. I'm actually changing the background and I'm making it look very unique. Right, so we can just drag this over here and create that teal looking color. What we can also do with this mask is to soften the edge so that the effect is not really strong like that, along that, so we can get this nice halo glow, and we can play around with the border width to see where that effect is actually falling here. So again, if we look at what we have here, if I go to the media in and I'll just left click and drag this here, this is our original media in, and this is now our output. So you can see I'm using this to create a nice greenish effect, and basically that's what you do with the masking tools. You can stack them on top of each other. For example, if I wanted to blur this, right, if I wanted to blur this, If I click on the color corrector and hit on the blur tool, we can actually see we have a blur here. And if I go to the blur and increase the blur size, it's going to blur out everything, right? So, but what I can do is, since I have this polygon mask, I'll just undo that. Just undo this, click on my polygon mask and hit the blur tool. It's going to place that blur in between here, and we can just see that blur size not being affected by that mask. And what we can do is to make sure we rearrange things properly so that we get the node order, right? So let's go ahead here. We have a polygon here. Let's click the blur tool to bring in the blur, and we'll pass in the blur tool into the polygon input like that. Now this is an output, it requires an input, so this won't work. But if we drag the mask here and click on that, it should connect to the mask like so. So that's not working because we need to use a merge node to combine two nodes together like that. So that's the purpose of the merge node. We can use the merge node to combine a node with another node. So here we have a merge node that has our polygon, and we can take our blur node and connect that here. So that we have that. If we go to the blur and drag the blur size, we can see that effect happening to the background. So that's just, by the way, that's the effect of the Fusion tab. We can do a lot of things here, work with text, work with our curve values, correction values, work with text and 3D texts. Very powerful workflow place. So let's jump up to the color corrector right now, color section, and we just play our clip so we can have that like so. And with the color tab, I know this is scary as well. What does the color tab do, and what do we expect to happen here in the color tab? Now, we did some of that in Fusion over here, where we just work with this node and we added some color correction here. So I'll just go ahead and just take the media out and place that in the media in, and we could just bypass everything here. And we also have a tool here that tells us to bypass the color correction tool. I'll just go to workspace and say reset UI layout. So we can do the same thing in the Fusion tab without even coming to the color section. But now that we're in the color section, let's go ahead and see how it works. So why do we need color correction, and what is color correction in the first place? Your color correction helps you specify your color space. Basically, are you producing for broadcast? Are you producing for social media? Are you producing for a specific mobile phone? What kind of camera colors are you using? What color space are you using? That's the purpose of this page right here. Use it for color grading, color correction. You use it to match all the colors in your clip. For example, I have this clip, I have another clip, and another clip. I want to match all these colors together. I can match all my colors within this color space. So each time we click on a clip, we can actually see this node view here again. So we have the node view in the color page. This is our input, this is our output, and this is called a serial. So it's basically a node that is expecting an input. And the first thing to do when you want to color grade is to balance. So let's start with our balance. I'll go over here to the wheel and click on the color wheels and click on the wheels over here. So now that we have that color wheel, we have things happening here. I'll go ahead and click the clips to hide the clip window. So we have our window here. We don't have a still gallery, so I'll just click on that, and we'll talk more on that very soon. So here we have a nice little clip of our video. And what's the lift, gamma, gain, and offset? What does that even mean, right? So think about this. These are your shadows, your midtones, your highlight, and this is your general control. If I drag this, I'll be controlling all three of these together. And here I can work with my darks and add a nice little dark shadow. Here I can work the midtones, which is great for skin. Here I'll work with the highlights, which is great for our bright areas. And once I'm done, I can organize all this. But how do I get a visual representation of whether my image is very dark, which is underexposed, or very bright, overexposed? That's why we have these waveforms here. By default, we have the parade. I'd like to switch that to the waveform. We also have a vector scope, and we have a histogram as well. So I'll just go over to the waveform, click on this setting and turn off colorize so I can see this in grayscale. Now what you don't want is to have your luminance value being crushed down here, and here we can see some very bright spots. So overall this is not good. Let's try and see how we can fix that. So first I'll drag my shadows to make sure they're up a bit and not going below that 0 line. For my midtones, I'll just drag them and make sure we have the color stretched out around here, and I'll just pull this back up like that. And then for the highlights, I'll just drag this down so I don't have, clipping over here. This going up to about 1000 means we're losing detail here. There are cases where you just have to do with it, but for here, I'll just do that. Now right click on this and I'll call this my balance, like so. And if I wanted to work with the entire offset, I'll just drag everything right here. Now to make this non-destructive, instead of working on the entire thing, we can right click on this and go to add a node and add a serial. So that's our balance. Let's say I want to desaturate this. I'll right click and I'll call this desaturate. So I'm removing the color. I want to remove color. And what I want to do is here on this window, I'll just go to saturation and just dial that down just a little bit. So now I'm desaturating. Now let's say, for instance, we have a lot of workflows here as well. If we go to the curves workflow, we can also work with our balance using curves. So I'll right click on this and go to add node, add a serial, and then here I'll just call this curve balance. And basically each time I make a change, I'll add a point here to push the highlights just a bit, and I'll add a point here to just push the shadows down a bit like that, and maybe I'll add a little mid-tone right here to just bring back those colors. Now most people prefer to work with curves, and they actually do the balance using the curves directly rather than the wheels, but I'm just over here and this is what I've done. So here I work with the wheels, and it's actually showing me, there's a little red dot here showing me that these are the wheels I work with. If I go to the curve, it's showing me a little red dot here and tells me, hey, you actually work with the curves right here. And what we can do is we can deselect each channel, and I just work on the red channel, and I'll just drag this down a bit to remove some of the red in case on my RGB parade it's showing me there's a specific color that's dominating. Here for example, blue is dominating, so I'll just go over to blue, and towards the mid-tone I just drag the blues down a bit. Even the highlights, just drag that blue down, just push that down a bit like that. So you can see what we can do in here. So our red is a bit high, so we'll just go over here. We're getting some clipping on the red, so we'll just drag that down a bit like so on the red channel, and I can just drag this down a bit as well, so we're not getting much of that clip on the red channel. So that's what we can actually do here. We can work with nodes in here as well. We can add our effects, and we can add nodes to tell us where we are. Now if I bring back the clip here, let's say we're happy with this. If I go to the gallery, I can right click on this image and say grab a still. This is going to grab a lookup table data that I can actually use to apply to our other clips. For example, if I have this clip and I want to apply the color grade here, I'll right click over here and say apply grade, and you can see it's applying that same grade I have to this clip. So if we click on this clip again, it's not using that grade. I can go back to this clip and say apply that grade, and you can see we have this same setting with each of these changes propagated. Now what we can also do is to work with a lot of tools here that we can do things like work with masking, like so. If I go over here and let's say for example I want to just mask this desaturation here, so I'll go over here and I'll do Alt S and add a node, and what I'll do over here is to use the pen tool and I'll just draw a nice little shape like that over here, like that. And now I actually have this over here. This is actually a mask, and we can actually see that output here on this window. And what we can actually do is to make sure that this is only affecting this section here, just like pretty much the example we saw in Fusion. So if you're a colorist and you're not really down with Fusion and say, hey, you know what, I just want this to work with my Fusion page, this is the content we're going to have right there on the Fusion page, right? So this is going to also work with our color here, we can do things like add a tracker here, and once we click play, it's going to track me throughout the entire duration of that short clip, like that, and any effect I have here will be affected within this small little window right there. So I have this mask here, and this is our mask, and we have our desaturate option. So if we go back here to our color wheels and we play around with the saturation, it's only going to be affecting that region if we work with the mask. So just something, by the way, you should know, and that's how that works as well. All right, and again, lots and lots of tools here. I'm just bringing out the tip of the iceberg. We have other tools here like the power window, tracker window. We have a blur tool, and we have a key. So we actually see that key here that's showing us our inputs. We can just blur that a little bit just to blur the edge, add low effects here. And then here on the audio tab, if we have a clip selected, we can do things like add an effect. For example, if I go over here on the audio, I can add an equalizer. I can use the Fairlight EQ, and then I can do things like play around with my effect, play around with the volume, equalize things, normalize them, and if I want, I can save that as a preset such that next time I can work with that. So that's where what the Fairlight comes in. For example, if I play this, we can just look at our EQs, and I can add a dynamic EQ to any of our channels in Fairlight. So Fairlight is where you can add sound effects. If I go over here, we can do things like remove noise, add delay, flank our voice, do noise training on our selection. Basically, that's what the Fairlight audio section is. You can use VST effects, connect that to your keyboard. That's what's happening in this section. And finally, we have the deliver section. The deliver section has some built-in presets. For example, if I want to deliver this for YouTube, I can just set a name. I'll call this YT done. That's the name of this, and I can check the resolution, check the format. I can normalize my audio, and then I can add everything here to a render queue. I can call this Y done, hit save, and once it's here, if I click render all, it's going to render this clip into one single clip based on how I set this. If I wanted to export custom, I can just click on this clip, go back up. I can call this cost for my second preset, render an individual clips if I want, or a single clip, set this to any output format, set my codec, set my timeline resolution, and add this to the render queue as well. So basically I have two tasks and two jobs being set here. So I have a first render and I have a second render on the render queue, which job 2. So if I click on this, I'm going to render the first one. Click on this, I'll render the second one. So as a quick wrap up, because I know that's a lot to take in, we're just getting familiar with the interface. The edit tab is where you're going to be working 99% of the time. We can go to our inspector and add effects, work with our audio, like so. And we can even quickly export our video all in the edit tab. Cut panel is designed to work with a hardware, and it makes it simpler and easier to work with cuts in case you just want to do things like work with your cuts. Here in our media tab, this is where we can import our media. Our fusion tab is a very powerful tab where we can create things like effects. Our color tab is where we can do things like color correction and work with similar node setup as well. We can do color balancing. We can work non-destructively. We can create our lookup tables. We can even import and manage built-in lookup tables for different devices. So we have we have our audio tab and our delivery tab. We also have here, if we click on Davinchi Resole, we can customize the keyboard, and we can do things again like, let's go ahead and close this. If we click the gear icon, we can do things like set our master settings for our timeline. We can use a vertical video resolution in case you want to do things like TikTok. We can set a CinemaScope. We can even set our anamorphic lenses here, anamorphic de-squeeze. We can apply that here in case we have anamorphic video. We can do things like color management to specify what screens we want to target. So that's a basic overview of what Davinchi Resolve does. Like I said, a very basic overview, very, very powerful software. You don't need to leave Davinchi Resolve to work with audio or do color correction or work with visual effects or 3D. Everything is built into one package. You don't need to leave this. Has a lot of free tools, although there's a paid professional option, but this is just a basic overview. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I know this is a lot to take in. We'll be going slower in the course, but just to give you a general overview, if it's the first time you're opening Davinchi Resolve, what the software does, what each of these tabs do, you have a basic breakdown of this. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next